Good morning. I'm Joanne Wong, Director of Corporate Services at the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. Thank you so much for attending our How to Do Business with Hannaford today. Today we have Kate Weaver, who's the Supplier Diversity Manager of Peapod Digital Labs, and the team from Hannaford, who she'll introduce shortly, that will speak about the procurement and supplier diversity process at Hannaford. I'd like to say thank you so much to the company for being a bronze level annual sponsor. Our annual sponsors are critical in helping the council provide programming for our MBEs, and we wouldn't be able to do this work without them, so thank you. And just a few housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. The session is being recorded. The presentation will be shared at the conclusion of the event. And there will be ample time for Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A box, not chat, so we don't miss any. And we will be sure to try and get to all of them. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thanks to the Hannaford team for being willing to join today and share their expertise. I'm going to walk through a little bit about PDL's Supplier Diversity Program and its span across the brands and entities of Ahold Delhaize USA. I'm then going to turn it over to two of my colleagues, Ryan Blessing and Tony G. Ryan is a category manager that serves on the fresh side of the business, but he's one of the original supplier diversity advocates that I've worked with for a couple of years that really helps advocate for diverse suppliers within the walls of Hannaford. Tony G is the manager of internal comms, engagement, and DE&I, and I probably email him more than I check my bank and my Spotify account. I email him all the time, and he is carrying the message of supplier diversity, especially as it relates to the customers and the communities that we serve. And then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation. We're going to speak with Hillary Hamilton. She's a category manager on the grocery side, specifically dealing with international, specialty, and general merchandise. But where Hillary's expertise really comes through is she is our member on our supplier diversity steering committee. She's the Hannaford rep. Now, as you can see from what I just said, a lot of this is focused on grocery and items that are on the shelf. And Joanne has told me that there are a few of you who are listening today that definitely have products that are hoping to get on the Hannaford shelves. And I hope you'll really have your ears peeled today. For those of you who are corporate services and indirect suppliers, I have a little bit of information that we're going to touch on, but just to kind of level set and manage expectations, a majority of today's conversation is going to be about how to get a product on the shelf. If you are not in that area, I have some sites and some directions to point you towards, but feel free to stay on because it's always good as any supplier is approaching Hannaford to know who Hannaford is, what they're about, what their big initiatives are, what their customers are. And by all means, if you are an indirect supplier or branded supplier, please take a walk through your local Hannaford before you even approach any category manager, buyer, or anyone, just so you can speak intelligently about the Hannaford business and their great operation. Okay, so let's talk about the larger organization. Ahold Delhaize USA is a very large organization that's actually comprised of several local brands. And since we're talking about Hannaford today, obviously I'm going to dote on Hannaford the most, but it also encompasses Food Lion, Giant Food, The Giant Company, Stop and Shop, Retail Business Services, Ahold Delhaize Procurement and Supply Chain, and then Peapod Digital Labs, which is currently where I sit. The supplier diversity function actually sits within PDL. There are quite a few functions that sit within PDL, and here's kind of an overall a chart for those of you who are in corporate or indirect services. You can kind of see where things lie. Retail Business Services, which is the services arm of our company, actually manages IT and supply chain and finance and pharmacy operations and legal. And then Peapod Digital Labs has, among other things, supplier diversity and loyalty and private brands, and a lot of our global sourcing that takes place. And when I say global, I just mean for the entire organization. I can't help but give one more plug for PDL to say that I think in the past, people thought that PDL was just kind of e-com, right? That seems very, you associate PDL, people at Digital Labs with e-commerce and click and collect, but it's much more. The people at PDL work on assortment services and consumer insights, definitely own brands and private brands. If you haven't been into a Hannaford store and tried the Nature's Promise or the Taste of Inspirations line, you don't know what you're missing. Some of those brands are great. And by the way, some of them are provided by NMSDC certified MBEs. I just can't tell you which ones because they tell me I'm not allowed to say that. So, but just know that you have a good chance when you're going in and you're trying one of our private label brands that it might be provided by an NMSDC business. So last thing before I turn it over, or before I get into the details about indirect and branded, I wanted to tell you that certification is super important to us. You wouldn't be here if you weren't familiar with the NMSDC certification. I'm going to trust that everyone on this call is an NMSDC certified MBE. If you're not, I'm hoping you're in the paperwork phase. Yes, it's a little bit of paperwork, and yes, it's a little bit of a slug to go through it, but it's so worth it. Quite frankly, it's table stakes for our company. We only recognize certified diverse owned suppliers among the NMSDC. We look at WeBank and the NGLCC and NAVOBA and MVBDC, Disability IN, and then the US HCC and US PAC. I know that's a lot of acronyms, but if you know, you know. And for those of you who are diverse owned suppliers, hopefully you realize how important these are and how beneficial these organizations are for more than just helping you get on the shelf, for networking and mentorship and programming and financing support and all that jazz. Okay, so for those of you who are indirect or corporate service suppliers, I really want to speak to you first because we're going to spend the most of our time talking about the shelf. On the right side of this page, you will see that diverse owned suppliers who want to provide goods and services for the operational side of our business, including Hannaford's operational side, we ask you to register on Supplier Gateway. We have a URL that's aholdelhays.suppliergateway.com. We will send this deck out to everyone afterwards, so you don't have to jot it down right now. But if you want to go ahead and be clicking on it and be registering, feel free to do so. It is a free registration, and the more information you put in there, the better. This database is checked in preparation for RFPs and other procurement opportunities. And just to give an example, I'm in a lot of communication with our NFR, our not for retail team, and they will email and ping me often and be like, okay, we're looking for floor resurfacing. We're looking for videographers. We're looking for background screening companies. I mean, you name it, anything that we are buying that goes behind the scenes of our grocery operations, and we're putting an RFP out for, they check with supplier diversity. And I'm very happy to say that that's what I spend a majority of my time doing. I am a one-woman sleuth, broker, recruiter, internal broker. I just don't make commissions, but I can't stress to you how important that is. And then I can almost hear what some of you are saying. Some of you are going, oh yeah, another registration portal. It's a black hole. I do agree that at some companies it is a black hole, but I will just promise you and stress to you that we really utilize it a lot, and it's really baked into our category management process, our category review process when it comes to indirect services, products and services. Okay, so now let's get to the fun part. Let's talk about diverse owned suppliers who want to be considered in the merchandising review process, how they get their products on the shelf. Well, the first step is to register on rangeme.com. Once again, this is a free registration site. There are some paid options where you can like elevate your status and be at the top of the listing. If you want to do that, that's up to you, but I really do more holistic searches. So I'm really looking for that perfect fit. If there's a category review coming up for, batteries, I'm looking for batteries. That's a horrible example. I'm sure Hillary's like, why are you saying batteries, Kate? But anyway, I really get specific as far as the category and subject matter. I'm not looking for who's paying to be at the top and who has all the bells and whistles. But I will say that the link is very important, because what I do is I take that link of your Arrange Me profile and I send it to the appropriate category managers. There's places where you can upload your pictures, all sides of your product, right? The UPC label and the nutritional code, nutritional label and everything. There's a section off to the side where you can list all your current retailers. I cannot stress to you how important that is. A category manager, almost their eyes will go to that to see what other retailers you are in. What if you say, oh, but I'm not in a lot of retailers yet. I'm just starting out. I'm just available online or at some independent boutiques and mom and pop grocery stores. Put that in there. There are options that you can write: independent retailers, independent gift shops, convenience stores, e-com, just all your points of distribution. That's what a category manager is going to want to see. At least I think that's what they're going to want to see. I should let them tell you first and foremost. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Ryan Blessing, our OG supplier diversity advocate, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Hannaford and give you a peek under the hood of who is Hannaford. Ryan?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kate. So as Kate mentioned, I'm Ryan Blessing. I'm a category manager on the produce team. But to get us started today, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of Hannaford, kind of a little bit of our history, who we are, and some of our overarching strategies. So as this slide kind of points out, Hannaford has been around for quite some time. We have over 135 years that started out with humble beginnings on the Portland, Maine waterfront, selling produce and whatnot, to the point where we are today with 184 stores, servicing an additional 40 independent stores across Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, and Massachusetts. We have 3 distribution centers across our network as well, one in South Portland, one
Has his screen frozen for y'all too?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure it was wonderful. Let me go to the next slide and he'll catch up. I was hoping he'd catch up. Tony, you want to pop in?
I'm happy to jump in a little bit if you'd like, Kate.
Please.
Sure. So I'm sure that Ryan was probably about to talk about some of the unique elements of our brand. So our brand purpose is together we're greater than groceries, and that obviously spans across all areas of our business. So whether we're talking about our associate experience, our customer experience, and certainly our vendor experience and our community experience, we want to be more than a grocery store. And I think that this is a really great example of how we are advancing in that area. Related to that, our brand strategy, which is fresh and convenient, we make fresh easy. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we've been refining our strategy and advancing the strategy to more closely reflect what are on the minds of our customers and what's going to create the best customer experience. Nestled within that strategy are some everyday commitments, and there are some really strong elements of the associate experience and DEI within that strategy. So it's something that's relatively new to the company in terms of being operationalized, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but something that's very important to our overall goals, strategy, and values as a company. I could talk a little bit about this page, but I think that what it probably best represents is our commitment to our investments in e-commerce and the customer experience. Currently, Hannaford has strong sales momentum, across the board. We are advancing very quickly in the e-commerce space, particularly with our Hannaford To Go offering, which is in the majority of our stores at this point. We also have scaled that out to our pharmacy operations and really emerging well into our delivery areas as well. We have it looks here like close to 2 million people enrolled in what has been identified as the gold standard of loyalty programs. So that obviously is something that is very important to the retail experience for many customers. But we also know that brick and mortar is something that is very important within the industry, and we continue to make investments in our stores, both from a customer experience, but also in terms of expanding our footprint across New England, and who knows, beyond. So Hannaford has a strong market share in the areas that we're in. We're constantly looking on how we can advance that and expand it. And as this demonstrates, continuing to make investments across the board. Actually, I would kick this to Hillary to talk a little bit about how we are, I know you're going to be talking in a minute, Hillary, but from a supplier diversity standpoint, how we come to life from a category merchandising perspective in our stores. Is this something that you would like to kind of tee up?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always say it's one thing to get on the shelf, but then it's one thing to get off the shelf. So we have dedicated merchandising vehicles in the store, merchandising programs in the store, and just one way that we support our DE&I certified suppliers is with wings in at least 140 to 160 of our stores during relevant time periods. So one of these pictures is from just this past year for International Women's Day. We had a wing that featured McClure's maple syrup, undercover quinoa stacks. My personal favorite, not just because they're on my desk, but those things are delicious. And also some purely Elizabeth granola, I believe, was on the bottom of that wing as well. We have a lot of Pride shippers coming out this month to support this month. Goodness, I'm early. Coming out in the next month or two to support us in June for Pride Month. And February this past year, we celebrated Black History Month, and we had Partake cookies and Black and Bold coffee on display. So it's another perk of being certified DE&I when you're in Hannaford, because normally you have to pay for displays. You have to pay to be off shelf. So whether it's a shelved wing or whether you're participating in one of our pricing programs like the WOW program or a hot feature, whether it's a shipper, we expect a COG discount on those items to get a shipper. We have front end register racks. All of those things are paid for with trade funds normally. So these displays were done without any fees from the vendors, just to support the brands, get them out there in front of customers. And it's been doing really well and opening a lot of eyes. Currently, that's how we can help show that these vendors are diverse owned at Hannaford, and we've got some other tricks up our sleeve coming down the pipeline to bring more visibility to these brands as well.
That's great. I appreciate it. And you're being humble that Hannaford does so much. They have this in-store magazine called The Fresh Magazine, and they've been doing lots of spotlights of diverse owned suppliers, as well as their internal magazine that's called Tony Voices. Is that what it's called? I love that. And they do huge features for supplier diversity that I may or may not bug them and ask them to do all the time, but they do very willingly, and it's really great because we want the Hannaford associates to be the best advocates, and they are the best advocates for diverse owned brands because they're right there at the point of purchase. So Tony, let's pick it back up with you. Talk to us about Hannaford's DE&I priorities, and I know you're going to show us a video too.
Sure. Thanks, Kate. And Ryan, I hope you will watch the video later and critique me on your presentation. Welcome back.
Thank you. I was just thinking that's literally the first time that's happened to me, doing virtual presentations and things over the last couple of years. So of course it happens today. I did go on for quite a while, I think, talking to a frozen screen before Hillary alerted me and told me I was frozen. So thank you for pinch hitting.
Anytime. So as Kate mentioned, I am the manager of internal communications, engagement, and DEI. That happens when you sit in HR. They just kind of keep expanding your role. But I love my role, and frankly, you know, the DEI as a role is something that's pretty new to Hannaford, and I say that because I think it's part of our DEI story. You know, one of the things that I think makes Hannaford really successful in the DEI space is partly a mixture of where we are, so our geography in northern New England, our exceptional leadership, our store managers and the leadership at our support office is incredibly intuitive, very well intentioned, and also very in tune with the expectations of the communities that we serve. And we've been ahead of DEI, I think, in many ways, and in some ways very informal before DEI was even cool. A good example is Hannaford and Food Lion, which was a sister company at the time, were the first two grocers to achieve 100% score on the HRC Corporate Equality Index 11 years ago. And that was a distinction that we held for, I think, 7 or 8 years, up until just recently. And I think that we are still one of only 2 grocers in New England that actually have a 100% score on the HRC Corporate Equality Index. The other being Stop and Shop, which is also part of our portfolio, as Kate mentioned. So it's just one example of many where Hannaford has been leading in the DEI space for many years. What I will say is that, over the past 2 or 3 years, what we've learned is that having an informal structure and being really well intentioned is not really where we want it to be. We want it to be at full power from a DEI perspective, and that's why we've taken a lot of measures, including adding DEI to my role, to really operationalize in this space. So taking the BRGs, taking our DEI council, and creating more structure for those. Really leveling up leadership competencies across the company, putting a whole lot of fuel on supplier diversity, which has been very helpful through that PDL relationship, which Kate talked a little bit about earlier, and Kate herself, and just the amazing amount of leadership that she and then people within the brand, such as Ryan and Hillary, have brought to this space, have truly brought us to the place where we are at least getting to full power in terms of what our DEI structure looks like. And I'd say that where we are now as a company from a DEI standpoint is that now that we have that structure in place, we're really understanding the genius of the and people like to use that fancy term intersectionality. I just think it's so when we're looking at our priorities, which are advancing our workforce, advancing our efforts to advanced workforce activities such as attracting new associates through talent marketing, when we think about our workplace in terms of how are we advancing our culture, and when we think about marketplace, which is really all about prioritizing things like supplier diversity, product assortment, and outreach to our communities that we work with, how do we bring those together at full force? So if we're having, if there is some sort of project or some element of our goals or strategies where we truly want to be at full power, how are we going to be thinking about how the ability to attract associates, to grow associates, and to grow those associates in a way that they are developing the competencies and leadership skills and the skill and other skills to be advancing in areas such as supplier diversity and product assortment, and what is the knowledge that they're going to bring to those spaces to truly bring the customer experience up to full speed. And I could talk all day about that, but we put together a video recently about our relationship with a local adult education program. Maine is very unique in that, and Portland in particular, in that we've hosted a number of new Mainers. It's a host city for refugees who are coming into the United States and into the state. And I think this is a really great example of how we're opening our doors and hoping that these new Mainers learn from us, but we can also learn from them. And by doing that, what we're doing is creating this ecosystem of advancing DEI all the way from workforce, all the way up to supplier diversity and product assortment.
After hiring so many folks from different countries who are in our community, we've been hiring them in Hannaford, and a lot of the feedback that I was getting was, why isn't there anybody in leadership who looks like me? And I said, oh, that's a really good question. So we decided to do a pilot internship program, folks with degrees and business backgrounds, and try to get them to see that they could have a career in Hannaford, so we can create more diversity on.
It's one of those tech days.
Yeah, it's probably, I can tell it hasn't buffered, so this might be one of the, it was such a good video, Tony, too. You obviously were the
leadership level of Hannaford.
I think it's going to buffer, so I think we will send it out to everyone afterwards.
Sounds good. I'll just give an explanation. So what we've done is we've created internships at the company for a number of these new Mainers and provided them with opportunities to learn the business. A lot of the people who are coming into Maine now have never experienced a grocery store similar to what we would find in New England or across the United States. So helping people learn the business, and by growing within the company and creating those opportunities for them to learn the business, simultaneously learning from them around, what are the products, what are the levels of service, what are the customer experiences that are important to them. What we create and what we nurture is a holistic environment where people are truly advancing inclusivity at Hannaford, from an associate experience, from a customer experience, from a product experience. So check out the video later. I think it's a great video, and it's I can't do it justice, but it's worth a watch.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I really want everyone to see it. It's really great. Okay, so like I said, meat and potatoes. Let's turn it over to Hillary, and she's going to walk everyone through just her advice about how a prospective new brand might land on the shelf at Hannaford. Hillary?
Sure. So to start on how to get on the shelves at Hannaford, you've got to approach category, right? And the best time to do that is prior to the start of the review. So I'm sure you want to know, how do you know when that review is happening? So the two best ways to do that we can suggest are, one, to partner with a preferred broker. So we do have an appendix at the end of this presentation that'll be posted that'll share with you who the preferred brokers are at Hannaford. But we suggest that as one of the options because they get our review calendars. They're privy to that information. They work with us often. And there's some other benefits that I'll get into in just a little bit on why we would suggest working with a preferred broker. Another way is to work through the DE&I team. So Kate has worked to facilitate some meetings with DE&I certified vendors for all of the banners, including Hannaford. Right now we're at 4 scheduled times a year, and she does that based on our review schedules. So Kate also is privy to that review schedule information and can kind of align that time better. So why we ask for you to be aligned with our category review is we have multiple reviews on each desk per year. So it takes a lot of our bandwidth to do those category reviews and give them the attention that they need. So to really look at something that isn't part of what we're currently looking at in terms of a review now, we can easily say, absolutely, we'll put you into the grouping or into the email communications when that review comes around, and then things happen. Someone could forget, someone could move desks, and you've lost that contact and it doesn't get passed on. So that's why we just try and make sure that initial contact is close to the upcoming review that matches with the items that you are presenting. So we've got the link here to the supplier diversity site. That's your way to get in touch with Kate and come at us that way. And like I said, in the appendix, you'll have the preferred broker list. Maybe you're familiar with some of those folks, maybe not. So then it gets into, what are we looking to hear? We have varying levels of presentation from national CPGs to some smaller brands. And it doesn't matter if they're DE&I supplied or not. Some folks miss the mark. So these are just some tips general tips on what we're looking to hear from anybody during a category review. So brief brand backstory. I know a lot of folks are very passionate about their brand, their items. They want to tell us the whole history of how you started. You want to tell us about every little ingredient that's in the item. So I say brief because we usually get sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes a half an hour to meet with a brand. And what I've noticed is 20 minutes in, I heard about your story and I heard about your items, but I haven't gotten to hear anything else. And there's 10 minutes left to kind of squish in the rest of the meat and potatoes. So once you've told us about your products and like that brief overview, focus on what differentiates you. So why your gluten-free cake mix over another gluten-free cake mix that I already have on the shelf? So what makes yours different? Help call that to my attention. Help me understand why we should either have two or why you should be replacing the item that we currently have on the shelf that meets that consumer need. Oftentimes there is something niche about your item, or maybe you don't have a competitor, you are just that niche. We need to know that and how you're going to tell that story to the customer. So I had someone presenting just that, a gluten-free baking item the other day. And, there were some unique ingredients in their items that come from, a very specific area. If that's not called out on package, or if that's not really part of your marketing story, now I'm curious, like, how are you going to tell that to the customer? If I select your item to bring it in and it sits right next to the other gluten-free baking mix, how does anyone know what makes yours different than the one next to it? How do they know that that ingredient is sourced from a very unique area? So that's what we're looking at when we say focus on your differentiation. In addition to that, some folks have a huge line of products that they're presenting. You could have anywhere from 1 to 5 items, or some folks come and they have 20, 25 plus items. It's realistic for any brand for us to take maybe 5 items, even from like a big CPG. That could sometimes be a lot for us to take in one review, because you have to think about it this way. All of our shelves are full. So we've got to take those 5 items in from the one CPG, we have to take 5 items off. So we really want to know what makes those 5 items more attractive than the 5 we're going to get rid of. We're a business too. We want to bring in more money with the new items that we bring in than the ones that we were bringing in that we had to get rid of. So if you've got 25 items, don't spend your whole time with us talking about all 25. You can show us and say, hey, I've got this huge portfolio, but these are the 5 I want to talk about today, and I want to focus on that I think Hannaford should start with if we're going to partner on this brand. So once you're talking about those and how you get to those 5 that you really want to push, bring us some data. So highlight your sales, highlight your current distribution. Where are you selling? Kate mentioned it earlier. We're curious about where you're selling in other grocery lines and those independents, because we want to know that you've done the homework and the back work to be able to supply a bigger grocery chain. We've tried it with some other larger vendors. We want to be first to market. We go, and then they can supply us the first shipment, and then things fall apart and they can't sustain that. So we've also learned those lessons the hard way. We'll still learn them. There's no crystal ball, no risk, no reward, but that's why we're curious in where you're already being distributed. So we want to see some sales trends. We want to see some numbers after you've told us about your products. How are you growing? Why are you growing? Why do we want your product? So tell us who your target customer is, and then relate that to our marketing area. So where's that customer in our marketing area? What's the opportunity in that market for us to bring in this item? Excellent. So the next slide. So a key is to be prepared. So know our pricing strategy and ensure your costs fit. So this is the number one thing I think that I see in some presentations is folks aren't familiar with Hannaford's pricing strategy. It's even different with all of the Ahold Delhaize banners. So we don't have the same pricing strategy as Stop and Shop. So it's important to know that Hannaford's an EDLP retailer. So we don't have a high-low model. So a lot of brands that we see present in front of us, They give us this cost. They say, we're going to promo it 8 times a year. That's just not how it works at Hannaford. We don't have 8 promo opportunities for any brand really to do 8 times a year. So it's important to understand we're EDLP, what we're looking for there. We're looking for your lowest of low costs. And then in addition, we would talk about some incremental funding to support your launch. So we have other ways to spend trade funds other than 8 promos a year. That's not to say we can't work on a promotion with you. We call them TPRs sometimes. We also have other pricing promotions if items get on the shelf and qualify. But that's mostly what we're looking for, and for the folks who are getting in front of us to be able to understand and really tier your cost structure and the costs that you're putting in front of us to that EDLP strategy. So incremental funds, I talked about it a little bit, but what that means is exactly what I said before. Yes, thank you, Kate, for spelling out my acronym, TPR, temporary price reduction. Incremental funding, once you get on shelf, you've got to get off shelf. So we can't just settle on, great, I got into Hannaford, my job's done here. Everyone's magically just going to find this item on the shelf and pick it up and buy it. We've got to get that item in front of customers. I'm sure you all know e-com's big now, roughly 10-15% of our business at times. So we need to be able to support that too. So we have opportunities to get in front of those digital customers as well with specific marketing programs. And I spoke a lot about the off-shelf display opportunities earlier, finding those additional points of interruption to get in front of that customer. So we're curious to hear about your incremental funding to support the launch as well. What I'll say towards that is a lot of brands come to us and they talk about their marketing spends that are general. So I spend with Ibotta. I spend, we have this social media campaign going. Those are great, and that's going to help build your brand. But we need to also, know how you're going to build your brand with the Hannaford customers specifically. So that's what we'll look for you to understand what some of those programs are. And trust me, a lot of folks that do business with us don't always know what they are. And that's something that we can talk about once we partner and really get into the meat and potatoes about what those opportunities may be. But we want to know that you're ready to, with some incremental funding to support them. We also want to know what your distribution plan is. Who do you have current partnerships with? How are you going to get your product to our stores, right? We just met with a small importer that has distribution in Miami, and they want to get to Hannaford. And, we had some conversation around, well, how does that work? Our model is we have our DCs. We have DSD, which is direct store delivery, meaning you drive the product to the store, it gets received in the back door, and you stock the product to the shelves yourself. And then lastly, we work with a distributor called UNFI. We work with the New Hampshire Distribution Center, and they deliver DSD to all of our Hannaford locations and independent locations. So that's a great opportunity and a partnership that we really look for new, smaller brands. So why we look for that opportunity is our warehouses are limited. Hannaford owns their own warehouses. So there's limited space in there. So in our 2 main DCs, we need big turns out of those items to make it a viable option to come into those DCs and take up a warehouse spot. We have 1 smaller DC, our single pick facility, also in Maine, but we still need some a good line of products coming on a single truck. So if maybe we start our partnership off with 1 to 3 SKUs, that's probably not worth anyone driving to the middle of Maine to our DC 3 on a small truck and small scale to drop that off and get an appointment at the dock and then take a slot in the warehouse. So for all these smaller niche items, we start with a UNFI partnership. That's not to say that once you build your brand and the volume's there, we can move you to a DC slot, which obviously we understand through UNFI, we're paying an upcharge. But that's sometimes what we need to do to make the business happen. So having that relationship ready is super important to us, and understanding who UNFI is. I'll say the importer out of Miami was under the impression that they could mail us the product, UPS or FedEx, and that it would come to our back doors and that we would stock it. That sounds great, but that's just not something that we're built to do. We don't have the labor or capacity to have products mailed in the back door. Kind of the quality control that's lost in between there too, even if it's a shelf stable item, just really isn't anything that we do business with. So making sure you've got a distribution plan ready for the Northeast, and you're able to handle up to 180 stores if you were to get full distribution. That doesn't always have to be the case. We do have some cluster stores that we really try and target some very specific markets, and UNFI allows us to do that as well. You know, they house all the products, they distribute to multiple customers, so they're able to do that and take in those items, and we're really able to be strategic and take these items into just our 28 Hispanic cluster stores and give those products the visibility they need. So lastly, we'll usually always ask, especially in this environment, what's your current status? Do you have any supply constraints? Do you have any production constraints? You know, we see a lot of supply constraints still happening from COVID, containers getting stuck at ports or on the water. So we'll want to know what your supply status looks like. And production constraints usually come down to either capacity, if you know we're going to be your first bigger customer, or maybe you have a big customer, are you able to handle two? But also labor is a big deal right now. And if you're going to be able to produce and not skip a beat as you work to gain customers, and sometimes brands build too fast and they can't really handle all of the new customers. So those will be some questions that you want to be prepared to answer as well. Before I jump to the next slide, Ryan, do you have anything to add that I may have glazed over? We'll give you another shot if you're not frozen.
No, I think you definitely gave a good overview. It definitely helps to be prepared with all the information that you provided. Again, like Hillary mentioned, we can go into some of these reviews, and there could be upwards of 40 different suppliers presenting for a particular category. So there's lots and lots of different opportunities. So whatever you can do to consolidate and kind of give us those main selling points that are really going to stick with the category managers, I think that can really be helpful to get on the shelf and for your long-term success of partnering with Hannaford.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. And all of that stuff I just went over, like I said, you've got usually 15, maybe 30 minutes to get all of that out there. So that's why I led off with keep that backstory and history of your brand pretty brief. Give us the highlights, and then make sure you leave time for everything else, and make sure to leave time for questions. We usually have some questions. We need to start some dialogue at the end of the conversation. So leaving 2 to 3 minutes at the end isn't always ideal. So one last way to get on the shelves at Hannaford is local. Maybe you're DE&I and you're local. What does that mean? That means usually that you're going to deliver your product DSD because you're hyper local. So you can, whether it's, I did mention UNFI is DSD, but you could be DSD on your own, delivering to the stores in a niche area around where your product is manufactured or around where it's distributed. You could get into stores that way. So there's contact on the bottom right of this slide on how you would go that route and be considered a local vendor and local product. You would go through applicant vetting. We have a local team here within Hannaford that vets those items. They look at your application. They work with our field merchandisers and DOs. That's our directors of operations. So they're in charge of a group of 12 to 15 stores in specific areas in our operating area. And they provide some insights on the vendor. Have you talked to the store about it is usually what they want to know. Is the store interested in carrying your product? What are the items that you're looking to bring in? And then that application, if all goes well with the field merchandisers, DOs, and stores, gets passed on to us at category level. So then we'll review that information and at that point either accept or reject that application. I just came off the dairy desk before this. Milk, butter, those kind of things were super hyper local and very popular. We bring in as vendors that can service as few as 3 stores. But that's hyper local and something that we're very interested in and a big part of Hannaford's strategy to support local. So all those things are options as well. Once the application is accepted or rejected, the vendor gets that communication. You complete your vendor form and your new item setup. Lots of paperwork, super fun. No matter how you come to Hannaford and get in, that paperwork is inevitable. Providing all your forms, W-9s, all those fun, I-9s, all those fun things. And it ends with retail communication. So the category teams, once the items are set up, it's almost just like a review where those items get communicated out to the stores and to our retail POG partners. POGs are planograms. That's how we know where to put things on the shelf. And the stores know and expect that's coming, and we kind of introduce you to them, provide that contact information. When's the start date? What items are you going to be bringing to them? What are the service expectations? So that piece comes last, right before you're going to start distributing to those stores. So that's one more option. 2, to become local. And I will preface, to be considered local, it needs to be grown, made, manufactured local. Local being within one of the states that we operate. So Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Mass, New York. That is key. It can't just be you're an importer who happens to have your office in Massachusetts. That doesn't work if the item wasn't actually grown or made in Massachusetts. It can't be imported from somewhere else and be considered local.
That's right. But before we get to, thank you, Hillary, before we get to the preferred broker page, because I did want to show them, I wanted to mention something about UNFI, and I put it in the chat. UNFI has a supplier diversity program themselves, and I know their supplier diversity managers. We kind of are symbiotic in the fact that I am referring diverse suppliers over to UNFI to get for UNFI to be their distributing partner, and they're always sending them to me saying, okay, we just have this new certified diverse owned supplier that's just been listed through our program. Like, can you get them into any of the Ahold Delhaize USA brands? And I'm like, let me see what I can do. So, but the good news is, and this is, I hope what everyone will hear, is that there are programs for certified diverse owned suppliers through UNFI. UNFI is not inexpensive by any means, but take advantage of the programs. Tell that this is one of the only cases really that I say that when you're talking to someone, you should start with the fact saying, I am an NMSDC certified MBE. When you talk to UNFI, lead with that, because then they can say, okay, this is the programs we have for you. There's a free registration site called their Up Next program, and I've put the URL in the chat function. It's free to fill out. There's no commitments, but what you do is after you fill out the profile, they consider it, and you put in that you're an MBE. They'll consider if they want to bring you into one of their special programs, and then they'll reach out to you and talk about it, and then you can decide then and there if you want to go through with it. So just wanted to throw that out. Can I ask a question though for either you or Ryan while we're on it? I see a lot of diverse owned suppliers that are in KeHE and Davidson. Is that an option, or is UNFI the one that you're like, you really want them to be in UNFI?
Hannaford does not currently have a distribution relationship with KeHE, so UNFI is our DSD essential broker, we'll call it, that we use. Okay, got it.
Well, then you already alluded to this, but before we get to the Q&A, I just want to show them. Let's show them the list of Hannaford preferred brokers. There are just so many. And if I was a diverse owned brand starting out that didn't have representation, I would do some interviews, right? I'd be reaching out to some of these and being like, tell me what you could do for me, and here's my product, and tell me what success you've had in placing and representing brands like me, products like me into the customers I'm trying to get into. To Joanne and Peter that are on the call, you'll note that I put a little call out to Navigator Sales and Marketing. I'm a big fan, and I was so glad to see that Hannaford utilizes them because they are an NMSDC certified Black-owned broker that we have a lot of diverse-owned brands that come through them. You don't have to be a diverse-owned brand to go through Navigator Sales and Marketing. I think they have a rather large portfolio, but I was excited to see them on there. Ooh, questions have popped up. Right as
Kate,
I was talking.
Before
Yes.
you get your first question, you just reminded me that I said I would come back to the preferred broker and why we like to use them. So I did miss that. So we also appreciate when you use a preferred broker, especially if you're a new vendor, because they know all of those things I just said about Hannaford. They're familiar with our EDLP strategy. They're familiar with our marketing opportunities to get on shelf. They're familiar with how to fill out our new item forms. They're familiar with how to set up our new vendor forms. So it makes it a lot easier to understand who Hannaford is and how we operate and what all of these forms are coming at you. So it's a great way to partner with a preferred broker and make your life easier.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back up through the presentation because we just got a question wanting to know what is the relationship between Hannaford and Ahold Delhaize. So I'm sorry, it was in my very, very first couple comments, and I know we were all having IT issues, but Ahold Delhaize USA is, I won't say the parent company because that's the wrong way to say it. It's an operational entity that several local brands feed into Ahold Delhaize USA, such as Hannaford and Giant and Food Lion and Giant Company and Stop and Shop, as well as Peapod Digital Labs, which is the omni-channel and commercial partner and engine that kind of runs all the ADUSA brands and entities. Hope that answered that. Okay, we have another question. What brokers are local to Merrimack Valley so we can meet in person if possible? Oh, goodness. I don't know. Let's go back to that broker list and see if anyone on my esteemed panel knows. Honestly, I don't know what Merrimack Valley is.
Merrimack Valley is in New Hampshire, I do believe. But unfortunately, I also don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. Maybe a little Google search for any of these might, do some cross-referencing there. I know the ones that are right down the street from us in Scarborough, but unfortunately, I'm not quite sure who's local to Merrimack Valley.
Yeah, because what they could do is they could put in Google, food broker plus Merrimack Valley, right? See what comes up and then see if it's on this list, and we'll send that out. But nowadays, is that 100% necessary to meet in person? You want a broker that has a good track record of representing and that has a big book of clients and business. And then if you like them and everything sounds right, you send them samples and your tear sheets and bing, bang, boom, right? I don't know. I could be romanticizing it because people want to send me samples all the time. And I always say, save your samples for the buyers. I am your internal broker that you don't have to pay a commission to. You said something that made me want to ask another question. In the very beginning of your session, you were talking about a brief backstory.
Yeah.
I always advise people not to tell any backstory. So, and I know you said 20 minutes or whatever, 5 minutes, but of that 5 minutes or maybe 1 to 2 minutes, do you want to know that they are an award-winning barbecue sauce? Or do you want to know that they are a sugar-free barbecue sauce? Or do you want to know that they're a local barbecue sauce? Like if you had one sentence, like what would be the most important to you?
If I personally had to pick out of those, I would want to know about the sugar. The award, the award would hopefully come through in your sales that you shared. You're award winning. You've had all these sales. You have all these great customers. You've won these awards potentially. But if you win awards and you don't sell your product, it's sort of irrelevant. I say the sugar piece because that's what I was saying when I said you could tell me what differentiates your product. So just like ketchup, barbecue sauce, I would assume they're sugar riddled products. That's just usually a key ingredient. So if you're pitching a sugar-free or a low sugar or a no sugar that's your differentiator, that you're telling me why you should be on the shelf. And there's either no or little competitors for something like that.
That's great. And you just perfect segue, because we were talking about sugar. We've got a question that's come up from a low sugar soda line, which I know I have pitched and I have worked on the Demi-Do profile for a long time, and they're sharing some concerns, which is, I think, a very good learning for the whole group. And let's just throw it out there and see what our esteemed panel has to say. They want to know, can they get placement without a distributor such as UNFI? They would much rather prefer DSD because they are hyper-local. Demi-Do is in Connecticut or something, and they'll probably put in the chat and say where they are, but they're very hyper-local to your territory. They're a canned soda that's very much, it would, and I shouldn't compare them to a national brand, but you know, they'd be in the soda aisle or maybe in the natural and organic aisle. I remember when I first looked at them, though, it was their distribution that was going to be a hang up. So can you just address how they would go around UNFI?
Yep, DSD is an option. I did list that off. If you're not coming through one of our 3 DCs or UNFI, direct store delivery is one of the options to get into a Hannaford. You still need to present a category. Connecticut, unfortunately, isn't one of the, it's not considered local.
I shouldn't have said Connecticut. I'm sorry.
That's okay. But if you can be from Connecticut and still deliver DSD if you want to drive to our stores, is what I'm trying to say. So if that's their case, if they were from Massachusetts and want to deliver DSD, they can go this local route. But it's not that we wouldn't look at anyone from Connecticut and offer them a DSD opportunity if that makes good business sense for that company to drive from Connecticut to whatever stores.
No, they're in Mass. And I can almost see that they're probably screaming at me. I just pulled them up. They're in Chelmsford, Massachusetts.
Yeah. So this local route and DSD would be a viable option for them if the category was to accept them.
So I've pulled up the slide. Demi-Do, go to that Hannaford.com local, email local@hannaford.com. Let's reach out that way. Because I have tried you through the supplier diversity angles, and I bet that UNFI thing, distribution has always been what hung us up, but let's try you through the local angle. And then also he made a comment that Range Me doesn't allow them to reflect the price drop that will occur if they have a large order. Love to hear your and Ryan's opinion on this. The Range Me thing that I use that when I utilize Range Me, I'm really trying to show the category managers your kind of packaging, your assortment, and your retailers. I personally am not really looking at the price and the margin. Are y'all looking at that? I mean, obviously you probably look at it, but
we are, and that's a big part of what we're looking to hear about in the presentation. And I think I'm assuming from what you said that we don't get to see the price drop. I think you're talking about them offering some sort of promo. That's what we want to hear about your incremental funds in your presentation. Though we're not high-low, I don't want a presentation that says this is your price and then we promo 8 times a year. I'm interested in your cost and the margin that we would have with your suggested retail, and what you can offer for incremental promos.
Perfect. Ooh, there's a lot of questions that are coming up, and I'm glad we still have a few. We have like 1 more minute. For contingent labor, is Hannaford PDL working with multiple staffing vendors or any MSP? Yes, we have 2. And then we have kind of instructions on how you can get in through that MSP, which we've actually had some good success. So please email supplierdiversity@peapoddigitallabs.com. and I will get you the names of those 2. Someone else says, can you still do DSD if you're based in Massachusetts, but your product is imported from out of state? Or can
yes, you're just not local.
Okay, you've already answered that. Okay, got it.
DSD you can be from anywhere. Most of you, I don't know if I'm allowed to say a current vendor we work with. Goya?
Sure.
They're DSD. Okay, Goya's DSD. They're not local.
Okay, good. Would UNFI consider our supplier application without customer demand? That's a good one. I think UNFI will take that into consideration as they are approving you for their special programs. They'll want to see if there is a demand, but you can say, I've had preliminary discussions and they all tell me I need to go to UNFI. So it's one of those things that you're going to get preliminarily approved through UNFI. You won't officially have to pay anything or go through any big contractual things until you have POs with retailers. I hope that helped. Okay, with the last question, what percentage goes to your brokers?
We don't pay the broker.
I was gonna say I have no idea. That's something
no clue.
Yeah, that's why I always say I don't get commissions. So, okay, I know we're running out of time. That was a lot of questions. Joanne, you want to finish this up?
Yes, thank you so much for this thorough and comprehensive overview of doing business with Hannaford. Thank you for your time today, Kate, Hillary, Tony, and Ryan. As I mentioned when we first started, we will be sharing this presentation at the conclusion of the event. And also you should see this video up on our YouTube page, hopefully by the end of today. So please let me know if you have any questions. And again, thank you for your time today. Thank you so much, Hannaford team and Kate.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.